The blind alien queen married a human. Her first night changed everything. The galaxy had never been silent like this before. Across 1,000 systems, screens glowed with the same image. The blind queen of the Lithari ascendancy standing at the center of the crystal hall, her silver crown floating gently above her head, guided by ancient gravitic fields. Her pale eyes, clouded since birth, stared forward without focus, yet every being watching felt as if she were looking directly at them. Beside her stood a human. His name was Elias Carter. He was not tall by alien standards. He wore no armor, no ceremonial blades, no glowing symbols of power. His suit was simple, dark, and human-made. His hands were empty. His face was calm, though his heart beat faster than it ever had in his life. No one spoke. Even the translators hesitated, as if afraid to give words to what was happening. For over 6,000 cycles, the Lithari had ruled their region of space. Their queens were chosen not for strength or beauty, but for blindness. A blind ruler, they believed, could not be deceived by appearances. She would rule by truth, sound, and instinct. The blind queen was sacred, untouchable, above all others. She was never meant to marry, and certainly not a human. Elias remembered the first time he had met her. He had been a junior engineer attached to a diplomatic convoy sent to repair a failing energy relay near Lithari space. A minor task, something no one important wanted to do. When a system fault had forced him into the inner chambers of the Lithari station, he had expected guards, punishment, maybe death. Instead, he had heard a calm voice ask, "Why is your breathing uneven, human?" He had answered honestly. He had said he was afraid, but also curious. He had explained the relay problem in simple words without trying to impress or hide. He had not known he was speaking to the queen. She had listened. That moment had changed everything. Now, months later, that quiet conversation had led to this impossible scene. The High Seers stood in a wide circle around the pair, their robes shimmering with biolight. Their faces were tight with barely controlled anger and fear. Nobles whispered in sharp, clicking tones. Military commanders gripped their staffs as if ready to strike. The queen lifted one slender hand. The hall fell completely silent. "I have chosen," she said, her voice steady and clear. "By the law older than sight, I take this human as my consort." A ripple of shock spread through the hall. Some aliens recoiled. Others hissed softly. A few stared at Elias as if he were a dangerous animal that had wandered into sacred ground. Elias did not move. He remembered what she had once told him late in that first conversation. "Stillness speaks louder than panic," she had said, so he stayed still. The queen turned her head slightly toward him. Though she could not see his face, she knew exactly where he was. She always did. "Elias Carter," she said, "do you enter this bond of your own will?" Every eye turned to him. He swallowed. "Yes," he said. His voice echoed through the hall. "I do." A murmur spread again, louder this time. Some voices were angry, others were confused. A few carried something close to fear. Humans were not supposed to say yes to this. The ceremony was brief, ancient, and strange to Elias. There were no rings, no vows spoken aloud. Instead, the queen and Elias placed their hands on a shared stone that hummed softly under their touch. The stone recorded heartbeats, neural patterns, and intent. It was older than their civilization, and it accepted the bond without hesitation. That alone unsettled the seers. When it was done, the queen inclined her head. "It is complete." No cheers followed, no celebration, only silence. Elias felt it then, the weight of an entire civilization pressing down on him. He was not just a man anymore, he was a symbol, a challenge, a question no one wanted to answer. They were escorted through the palace corridors by silent guards. The halls were vast and beautiful, made of smooth crystal and living metal. Light flowed along the walls like water. Every surface gleamed. And yet, as they walked, Elias noticed something deeply wrong. The queen's steps were careful, too careful. She counted them. Her fingers brushed the air near the walls, never quite touching. The guards walked slightly ahead, speaking softly to each other, not to her. No one guided her. The palace was built for those who could see. Elias felt a quiet anger grow in his chest. When they reached the queen's private chambers, the guards stopped and bowed. The doors slid open with a gentle hum. Inside, the room was vast, with high ceilings and open balconies facing the stars. The guards left without a word. The doors closed. For the first time since the ceremony, they were alone. The queen stood still, listening. Elias realized she was waiting. "For me?" he asked softly. "Yes," she replied. "Tell me where I am." He hesitated, surprised. You don't have attendants. They speak around me, she said. Not to me. He took a slow breath and began. The room is wide, he said carefully. The floor is smooth, warm underfoot. There's a large open space in the center. The ceiling is high and there's light coming from the walls, not harsh, gentle. Ahead of us is an open balcony. I can see stars, blue and gold ones. She tilted her head slightly, listening intently. My crown, she asked. Is it straight? Elias smiled faintly. Yes, perfectly. A pause followed. No one has ever answered that question directly, she said. He didn't know what to say to that. He moved slowly, making sure she could hear where he was. There's seating to your left, a long resting platform near the far wall. It looks comfortable. Show me, she said. He offered his arm, unsure if it was allowed. After a moment, she placed her hand lightly on it. Her touch was cool, steady, trusting. As they walked, Elias adjusted his pace to match hers. He felt the tension ease from her posture little by little. This palace, she said quietly, was built by generations of sighted minds. They believed honoring me meant never changing it. That's not honor, Elias said before he could stop himself. She stopped walking. The silence stretched, then she smiled. That, she said, is why I chose you. Later, as artificial night settled over the capital, Elias stood by the balcony. He watched the stars drift slowly as the station adjusted its orbit. Somewhere beyond those lights was Earth, far away, fragile, and completely unaware that one of its people now stood at the center of galactic history. Behind him, the queen sat quietly, listening to the hum of the palace. Elias, she said. Yes. Are you afraid? He thought about lying. He decided not to. Yes, he said. But not of you, she nodded. Good, fear is honest when it chooses its target. A faint vibration passed through the floor. Elias felt it instantly. His engineering instincts flared. Did you feel that? He asked. Yes, she replied, and your heartbeat changed. Another vibration followed, sharper this time. Elias moved closer to her without thinking. Something's wrong. She stood, her expression calm but focused. This, she said softly, is why this night matters. Far above them, hidden systems activated, ancient protections stirred. And in the shadows of the palace, those who opposed the union realized their first mistake. They had underestimated a blind queen, and they had completely misunderstood a human. The first night had only just begun. The vibration came again, stronger this time, like a low pulse moving through the floor and up into the walls. Elias did not need alarms to know something was wrong. This isn't normal, he said quietly. The blind queen tilted her head, listening not just with her ears but with her whole body. No, she agreed. The palace breath has changed. Elias frowned. Breath. The palace has a rhythm, she explained. Energy flows, guards move, systems hum. Right now, something is holding its breath. Another tremor passed through the chamber. Far away, metal shifted. Something heavy locked into place. Elias moved closer to her. He did not touch her this time, but he placed himself between her and the open space of the room without thinking. It felt natural, like the body reacting before the mind could argue. Where are your guards? He asked. They will not enter unless summoned, she replied. Tradition, Elias felt a sharp flash of anger. Tradition is about to get you killed. The queen did not react with offense. Instead, she nodded slightly. Then speak, human, what do you hear? He closed his eyes for a second and focused. Years of working on stations, ships, and unstable structures had trained him to listen. He heard the faint hum of energy rerouting. He heard air pressure shifting in patterns that made no sense for comfort systems. And beneath it all, he heard something else. Movement. Someone's inside the palace, he said. Not guards, not attendants. The queen's face remained calm, but her hand tightened slightly at her side. Assassins, she said. I wondered how long it would take. Elias stared at her. You sound like you expected this. I always do, she replied. Every blind queen faces her trial. Some face it sooner than others. Another sound echoed, soft, controlled footsteps beyond the chamber doors. Elias' heart began to race. The queen noticed immediately. Your pulse has doubled, she said gently. Yeah, Elias muttered. That happens when people try to kill my wife. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Wife. The queen was silent for a moment. Then she said, that word carries weight. He swallowed. I meant no disrespect. You gave none, she replied. You gave truth. The door controls flickered. Elias stepped closer to the queen. Is there a safe room? There is a sanctum, she said, but it requires sight to activate. Of course it did. Elias cursed under his breath. He scanned the room quickly. The palace designers had focused on beauty and ceremony, not defense. Smooth walls, open spaces, very few places to hide. The door began to open. Slowly, silently, three figures slipped inside, their forms wrapped in adaptive cloaks that bent light around them. Even so, Elias could see faint distortions in the air. Professional, very professional. Elias raised his hands slowly. "Don't move," he whispered to the queen. "I will not," she replied. The assassins spread out, forming a loose arc. They carried slim weapons, quiet and efficient. One of them spoke, voice distorted. "Step away from the queen, human." Elias did not move. "She is under our protection," the assassin continued. "Your presence was an error that will now be corrected." Elias laughed softly, more from nerves than confidence. "You guys picked the wrong night." The queen spoke before the assassin could respond. "You violate sacred ground." "Sacred ground does not protect a broken tradition," the assassin replied. "A blind ruler may guide." "But she must not choose." The queen's head turned slightly toward Elias. "They fear choice," she said. "That is their weakness." Elias' mind raced. He was unarmed, he was outnumbered, and yet the assassins were hesitating. They were listening to the queen. That was when Elias noticed something else. The assassins were careful with their steps. They were watching the floor. An idea sparked. "Your cloaks," Elias said casually. "They're tuned for visual distortion, right?" The assassin stiffened. Elias smiled grimly. "Yeah." "Thought so?" He slammed his foot down hard. The palace floor reacted instantly. A pulse of resonance rippled outward. The Lithari used vibrational systems to move energy efficiently. Elias had felt it earlier. Now he exploited it. The resonance threw off the assassins' balance. Their cloaks shimmered wildly as sound and vibration overloaded their sensors. The queen moved at the same moment. She did not strike. She did not run. She spoke. A sharp, clear command in the ancient tongue. The palace answered. Hidden barriers snapped into place. Energy walls flared up, slicing the room into sections. One assassin was caught off guard and slammed into a barrier, stunned by feedback. Another fired blindly. The shot missed Elias by inches and struck a wall, triggering an alarm that screamed through the palace. The third assassin turned to flee. He did not get far. Elias grabbed a heavy ceremonial stand and swung it with everything he had. It connected with a dull crack. The assassin collapsed. Silence fell, broken only by alarms and distant shouts. Elias stood there, breathing hard, hands shaking. The queen stood perfectly still. Then she exhaled. "That," she said softly, "was different." Elias looked at her. "Different how?" "No one has ever stood in front of me like that," she said. "Not guards, not champions. Not lovers." He rubbed his face. "I didn't really think about it." "I know," she replied. "That is why it mattered." Guards burst into the room moments later, weapons raised. They froze when they saw the fallen assassins and Elias standing between them and the queen. One of the guards lowered his weapon slowly. "Your Majesty, are you harmed?" "No," the queen said, "but something has been revealed." The guards dragged the assassins away. Attendants followed, buzzing with fear and confusion. Systems powered down. Alarms faded. Soon the room was quiet again. Elias finally let himself sit down on the edge of the platform. His legs felt weak. "That was not how I imagined our first night," he said weakly. The queen turned toward him and sat as well. She did not need to see his face to know his exhaustion. "Nor I," she said. "Yet I feel clearer," he frowned. "Clearer." "Yes," she replied. "I heard your fear, I felt your decision. You did not act from duty, you acted from care," he shrugged. "Where I come from, we call that basic decency," she smiled. "Then your species has more of it than the galaxy believes." Outside the chamber, word spread quickly. Assassins had failed. A human had intervened. The blind queen had survived without calling her elite guard. By morning, the palace would be buzzing with rumors. Elias leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," the queen said, "but neither will we." He turned to her, surprised. "We," she nodded. "You are bound to me now, Elias Carter." "Not as a symbol, as a partner." The word sent a strange warmth through him. "I don't know all your ways," he said. "I don't even know all your enemies." "You will learn," she replied, "and I will learn yours." She reached out, placing her hand lightly over his heart. "Your rhythm," she said, "it calms when you choose purpose over fear." He smiled tiredly. "That's a human flaw. We're bad at giving up." "Then the galaxy is in trouble," she said softly. Beyond the walls, stars continued their slow dance. And deep within the palace, ancient powers stirred, not in anger but in recognition. The first night had changed something fundamental, not because of blood, not because of force, but because a blind queen had listened. And a human had stood. The quiet of the palace was shattered by the storm of whispers that followed the events of the night. News spread quickly across the Lithari capital, reaching every corner of the empire in mere hours. The blind queen had been attacked. No, that wasn't quite right. The blind queen had been tested, and she had passed, but not alone. She had a human consort now, one who had stood between her and death. It was a mark of something new, something dangerous. By morning, the corridors of the palace were filled with the sound of hurried footsteps, cloaks swishing as attendants, courtiers, and military leaders rushed to the queen's private chambers. No one knew exactly what had happened in the stillness of the night, but they all knew one thing. The status quo had been shattered. The first cracks had appeared in a foundation that had stood for thousands of years. Elias sat on the edge of the queen's sleeping platform, trying to steady his breath. He had barely slept, the adrenaline of the night keeping him awake long after the danger had passed. His mind kept circling back to what the queen had said to him. "You acted from care." The words haunted him, though he didn't know why. Of course he'd acted from care. That's what you did for people you wanted to protect. Wasn't that basic decency? But the queen had meant more than that. He turned his gaze toward her, but she was lost in her thoughts, fingers tapping rhythmically against the smooth surface of the platform. It was a habit she had when thinking. Elias knew better than to disturb her. He had learned quickly that when she fell silent, her mind was working in ways most people couldn't understand. The door to the chamber opened softly, and the first advisor entered, her steps light but purposeful. She was tall and graceful, with long, silver hair that shimmered in the dim light of the room. Her presence was commanding, though she never raised her voice. "Your Majesty," she began, bowing slightly as she addressed the queen. "The court demands to know what happened last night. There are many who fear the consequences of this union." The queen did not look up immediately. She merely continued tapping the platform with her fingers, the sound soft but insistent. "I will speak to them," she said finally, her voice steady and clear. "But first, I need to know why this attack happened. It was not a random event. This was deliberate. Someone sent them." Elias stiffened. "You think this wasn't just about you being blind?" "No," the queen replied. "That is what they want you to believe. It was not the blindness they sought to attack. It was the change." Elias frowned. The change in the balance of power," she said, her voice calm, though there was an edge to it now. "The old ways are crumbling. The Lithari have been isolated from the rest of the galaxy for far too long. They believed their blindness gave them an advantage. But now there is something else. There is you, Elias Carter." He shook his head, not understanding. "I'm just a man. I'm not some force of nature." The queen's lips curled into a faint smile. "You don't see it yet, do you? Humanity's greatest strength is not in its physical power or its technological advancements. It is in its adaptability. You see a problem and you find a solution. You do not fear change. That is why you will succeed here." The first advisor glanced at Elias, then back at the queen. "The council has already begun to discuss the implications of this marriage. They will not accept a human consort. Some believe that if you do not remove him, the Lithari will lose their position as the dominant species in this region of space." The queen's expression hardened. "Let them think that. The true strength of the Lithari lies in our unity, in our ability to adapt. If they cannot see that, they are blind in ways far worse than I." The advisor bowed her head. "I will prepare the court, Your Majesty." As she turned to leave, the queen reached out, her hand hovering in the air for a moment before it made contact with Elias' arm. The contact was light, but the message was clear. She needed him to stay. "Elias," she said quietly, "there is something you must understand. What happened last night was not just an attack. It was a test for both of us." Elias raised an eyebrow. "A test?" "Not just for us," the queen replied, her voice gaining strength, "but for the entire empire. They need to see if you can withstand the pressure. They need to see if you will bow to their expectations." Elias sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't even know what those expectations are. How can I fight something I don't understand?" The queen's gaze softened for a moment, her expression shifting slightly. "You are not alone in this. We will learn together." A new wave of determination washed over him, stronger than before. He didn't know what kind of battle they were stepping into, but he knew one thing for certain: he would not let her face it alone. The court convened later that morning, in the heart of the palace, in a vast chamber adorned with intricate stonework and shimmering light panels. The nobles were already assembled, their faces a mixture of curiosity, anger, and fear. They were not used to having their traditional structures questioned, especially by a human. Elia's was a curiosity to them, a symbol of something they could not understand. When the queen entered, the room fell silent. Her presence was as commanding as ever, though the weight of what had transpired hung over her like a cloud. Elias stood by her side, but it was clear that he was an outsider, a reminder of everything that was changing. The first advisor spoke first. "Your Majesty," she began, "the council is assembled to hear your explanation. The events of last night have left us all with many questions. Why would you choose a human? Why now? And what do you intend to do about the attack on your life?" The queen stepped forward, her voice carrying through the chamber. "Last night was not an accident. It was a message. It was an attempt to see if I would bow to their demands, but I will not. I will not be a puppet to tradition or fear." The nobles murmured amongst themselves, some nodding, others shaking their heads. The queen continued. "I have chosen a human consort because I believe in change. I believe in strength through unity, not division. The old ways of the Lithari are not enough anymore. We must grow. We must adapt. If you cannot see that, then you are blind in ways that I will not tolerate." There was a sharp intake of breath from the crowd. The queen's words were bold, and they struck at the heart of everything the Lithari believed. But she stood firm, unwavering. Elias felt the weight of the moment, but he did not falter. He had made his choice. He had chosen her. One of the council members, a tall, dark-skinned noble, stood up. "You speak of change, Your Majesty, but can you truly believe that a human, someone who has no understanding of our ways, can help us maintain our place in the galaxy?" The queen turned her gaze to the noble, her eyes unflinching. "I do not need someone who understands our ways. I need someone who can see beyond them. A human does not fear what they do not know. They will fight for what is right, even if it means breaking tradition." The room was still, the silence heavy with uncertainty. The nobles did not know how to respond. Some had expected her to back down, to apologize, to undo the decision. But the queen had not. And that, more than anything else, made them uneasy. The first advisor spoke again, her voice softer this time. "Your Majesty, we respect your decision, but we must consider the consequences. The galaxy is a dangerous place. We must maintain our alliances. If the Lithari falter now, we risk everything." "I understand the risks," the queen said, her voice unwavering. "But I will not let fear decide our future. We are stronger than that." The council fell into an uncomfortable silence. They did not know how to proceed, and the queen had given them no easy answers. But Elias knew this much. She would not let them win. Not with fear, not with tradition. She would face whatever came with the same courage she had shown last night, and Elias would stand by her. The queen turned toward him, her expression softening. "Elias," she said, "will you stand with me even when they try to break us?" He didn't hesitate. "I'll stand with you, always." And in that moment he knew they were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed the council meeting were filled with tension. The queen's bold declaration had shaken the foundations of the Lithari Empire, and whispers could be heard everywhere, among the nobles, the warriors, and even the common people. Elias had learned quickly that the Lithari were a deeply traditional people, and any challenge to their customs was not only dangerous, but deeply unsettling to them. The shock of the queen's marriage to a human had sent ripples through the entire palace. It wasn't just the council that was upset. The palace itself seemed to hum with a strange energy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Elias had expected hostility from the nobles, but the soldiers, the guards, even the servants, those who had always served the monarchy without question, seemed just as uneasy. They were used to the quiet strength of their rulers. They were not prepared for someone like him, someone who represented change, who didn't fit the mold. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the rest of the palace slept, Elias sat in a small, private chamber near the queen's quarters, staring out the window. His mind raced with thoughts of what had happened and what was to come. He had not asked for any of this. He had simply been in the right place at the right time, and somehow that had led him to this point, a place where history was being written. The queen had chosen him. That much was clear, but why? She had already explained it once, but Elias still struggled to fully understand. Was it his humanity, his adaptability, Or was there something more, something in him that the queen saw that no one else had? A soft sound behind him broke his thoughts. He turned to see the queen standing in the doorway, her presence filling the room. She was dressed in simple, flowing robes, her blind eyes not looking in his direction but still managing to find him. There was a quiet strength about her, a calmness that was both disarming and intimidating. She had been born to rule, and she did so with a grace that Elias had come to admire. "Elias," she said, her voice steady, but he could hear the slight edge in it. "The council has requested an audience." He nodded, rising from the chair. "I'm ready." "Are you?" she asked softly, her tone carrying a depth of understanding. She could feel his uncertainty, his inner conflict. Elias paused for a moment, trying to sort through his emotions. He had never wanted to be a symbol. He had never wanted to be a part of something bigger than himself. But here he was, thrust into a political firestorm that was as dangerous as it was complex. "I'm not sure what to expect," he admitted, "but I won't back down." "Good," the queen replied. "Neither will I." They walked together through the winding corridors of the palace, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the smooth marble floors. The palace, once a place of calm and reverence, now seemed like a battlefield. Every step weighed down with the pressure of the decisions that had been made. The air was thick with uncertainty, and every face they passed was either filled with curiosity or veiled hostility. As they reached the council chamber, the doors opened, and they were greeted by the sharp gaze of the nobles and military leaders who had gathered. The room was silent, tense. Elias could feel the weight of their eyes upon him, could almost taste their disapproval. But the queen did not flinch. She walked forward, her head held high, and Elias followed closely behind her, stepping into the lion's den. The first advisor, a tall, severe-looking woman with silver hair, stood at the head of the table. She looked at the queen and then at Elias, her eyes narrowing slightly. The other members of the council, old men and women, some of whom had served the monarchy for decades, were silent, waiting for the queen to speak. "Your Majesty," the first advisor began, "you have not answered the questions we posed. You have chosen a human as your consort, someone who has no place in our traditions, no understanding of our people. What do you intend to do about the growing unrest?" The whispers of rebellion are growing louder every day. The queen stood tall, her posture unwavering. "I have answered your questions already. This union is not a mistake. It is not a choice made in haste. It is a necessary step for the future of the Lithari Empire." A murmur rippled through the room. The nobles exchanged nervous glances, but no one spoke. The queen continued. "We cannot remain in isolation forever. The galaxy has changed, and we must change with it. The time of blind tradition is over. If the Lithari are to remain a force in this galaxy, we must adapt, and that includes embracing what we have feared." Elias could feel the eyes of the council on him, but he stood firm. He had never been one for speeches, but now he understood the weight of the queen's words. He wasn't just standing beside her, he was standing for something much larger. The very future of the Lithari depended on what happened next. The first advisor stepped forward, her expression hardening. "And you think a human can lead us through this time of change?" "Someone who knows nothing of our history, our ways." Elias opened his mouth to respond, but the queen silenced him with a raised hand. "I chose him because he sees what others cannot. He is not bound by tradition. He does not fear change. And most importantly, he does not fear the future." The first advisor scoffed. "And what of the risks? What of the consequences? You are a queen. You should know that leadership is not about embracing every change that comes your way." The queen's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Leadership is not about maintaining the status quo. Leadership is about vision. It is about seeing what is needed, even when others cannot." There was a long silence as the council members exchanged looks, but no one spoke. They didn't know how to respond to such defiance. The queen was breaking every rule they had ever known, and they could not find a way to stop her. Elias took a deep breath. "You want to know why I'm here? Why the queen chose me? It's simple, I don't have the answers, but I'm willing to find them. I'm willing to stand with her, even when the whole galaxy tells us we're wrong." The room fell deathly silent. The first advisor glared at him, her lips pressed tightly together, but she said nothing. Elias could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't just defending himself. He was defending the queen, defending her right to choose her own path. And that, more than anything, made him feel stronger than he ever had before. The queen turned toward him, her eyes softening. She did not need to see him to know the truth of his words. She had chosen him not because of his strength, not because of his skills, but because of his heart. And in that moment, standing side by side with her, Elias knew that he was ready for whatever came next. The first advisor opened her mouth to speak again, but before she could, the doors to the chamber burst open. A soldier stepped in, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty, there is a situation outside the palace," the soldier said, his voice strained. There are protesters. They are gathering in the streets, demanding that the queen abdicate her throne." The room went still, the council members frozen in shock. The first advisor's face turned ashen. "They are calling for the end of your reign," the soldier continued, "and they are calling for your consort's death." Elias' heart skipped a beat. He turned to the queen, who was still standing tall, her face composed. "Let them come," she said softly. "We will not back down." The council members looked at each other, unsure of what to do. This was a crisis, one that could tear the empire apart. But the queen's words carried weight, and they knew that this was not a time for hesitation. This was a time for action. The first advisor stepped forward, her face tense. "What do you wish to do, Your Majesty?" The queen's gaze turned to Elias, and for a brief moment their eyes met. He could see the weight of everything she carried in that single glance. She was not just a ruler. She was a symbol, a leader in the truest sense. "We will face this together," she said, her voice unwavering. "We will stand firm, and we will show the galaxy that the Lithari are not to be underestimated." Elias nodded. "Together." And with that, they turned toward the doors, ready to face the challenge that awaited them. The palace had been shaken, but they were not broken. Not yet. The future was uncertain, but they would face it side by side. The streets outside the palace were teeming with chaos. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of protesters had gathered in the heart of the capital, their voices raised in a collective roar of anger. It wasn't just a protest, it was a rebellion. The message they carried was clear. The queen's choice to marry a human was a betrayal, a violation of everything the Lithari Empire had stood for. They demanded her abdication. They demanded the end of the Union. And they wanted Elias Carter, the human consort, gone. Elias stood beside the queen in her private chamber, his fists clenched at his sides. He had never imagined a day like this. The protests outside the palace were just the beginning. It was clear now that the unrest had spread beyond the walls of the palace. The entire empire was on the brink of something bigger, something far more dangerous. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, but the queen stood resolute, her gaze unwavering as she stared out the window toward the masses below. "They won't stop, will they?" Elias asked quietly. "No," the queen replied, her voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "They are afraid of change, afraid of what they cannot control." Elias exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being adaptable, on thinking quickly in moments of crisis. But this was unlike anything he had ever faced before. It wasn't just his life on the line, it was hers. The fate of an entire empire was now intertwined with the choices they had made. The queen turned toward him. "We will not yield to fear. We will stand together, Elias. If we do not, everything we fought for will be lost." Elias nodded, though a wave of uncertainty washed over him. He had never wanted this kind of responsibility, but now there was no turning back. He had made his choice when he stood by her side in the council chamber, and he would stand by her now, no matter what came next. The first advisor entered the room, her face drawn with worry. "Your Majesty, the crowd grows larger by the minute. The military is mobilizing, but they are hesitant. There is no unity among them. Some support you, but many fear what will happen if they do not put down the protesters." "They do not fear me," the queen said softly. "They fear change." "What should we do?" Elias asked. His voice was steady, but he couldn't hide the tension in his tone. He had never been a military strategist. He wasn't even a politician. What did he know about quelling an empire-wide rebellion? The queen turned toward him. "We do not fight with force, we fight with words." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Words?" The queen nodded. "The Lithari have always been a people of ceremony and tradition, but they are also a people of deep honor. They value strength, yes, but they also value unity. If we can show them that our union is not a threat, but a promise of a new future, we will win them over." Elias wasn't sure how words alone could change the minds of thousands of people who were already shouting for blood. But he knew one thing for certain. The queen's confidence was not something to be dismissed. She had faced impossible odds before and come out victorious. Perhaps, just perhaps, she knew something he didn't. The first advisor stepped forward. The council is split. Some want to send soldiers to the streets to put down the protesters. Others want to call for an immediate vote on the Queen's future. If we do nothing, the unrest will only grow. We will do nothing, the Queen said firmly. At least not until I speak to them. Elias blinked. Speak to them? Bring me the people, the Queen commanded. I will go to the steps of the palace. I will speak to them directly. A deep silence filled the room as everyone absorbed the weight of her words. The first advisor hesitated. Your Majesty, this is dangerous. The crowd is already hostile. If you go out there. I will go out there, the Queen interrupted. They need to hear me, not from soldiers. Not from their leaders. They need to hear the truth from me. The first advisor did not argue further. She knew there was no stopping the Queen once she had made up her mind. The Queen stepped onto the balcony of the palace, Elias by her side. The crowd below fell silent as they caught sight of her. Thousands of eyes turned toward the palace, waiting. The air was thick with tension, with a nervous energy that crackled like electricity in the air. The Queen raised her hand, not to command, but to calm. Slowly, the murmurs from the crowd died down, and a stillness settled over them. Elias could feel the weight of every eye upon them. It was as if the entire galaxy was watching. My people, the Queen began, her voice carrying across the plaza. I know that many of you are angry. You are afraid, you fear that the choice I made, my choice to marry a human, will destroy the very foundation of our empire. You fear change. You fear what you do not understand. The crowd remained silent, waiting for her next words. Elias could feel the intensity of their gaze. He had never been the center of attention in a moment like this, but now, standing by the Queen's side, he felt the enormity of the responsibility that had been placed upon them both. I will not lie to you, the Queen continued. This union is not what you expected. It is not what many of you wanted, but it is what our empire needs. She paused, her blind eyes seeming to look directly at Elias, though he knew she couldn't see him. There was something in her gaze, something that held more power than any of the words she spoke. Humanity is a species that does not fear change, she said. They adapt. They find solutions when others cannot. I have seen this in Elias Carter. I have seen the strength of his heart. He does not seek to destroy what we have built. He seeks to build something new. Something better. The crowd was still. Not one voice rose to interrupt. Elias could feel the shift in the air, the subtle change in the mood. The Queen had captured their attention, and now it was up to her to hold it. Together, she said, we can shape the future of the Lithari Empire. Together, we can face the challenges ahead. We will not be defined by our past. We will be defined by our choices, by our courage, and by our unity. This is not a human-s fight. This is not a Lithari's fight. This is our fight, all of us together. For a long moment, there was only silence. Elias' heart pounded in his chest. Could it really be this simple? Could words alone quell the storm brewing outside? Could a single speech from a queen who had defied her people's expectations change their hearts? And then, slowly, it began. A single voice rose from the crowd. It was quiet at first, tentative, but then another joined in, and another. Until the entire crowd was murmuring, voices rising in a wave of sound. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a chant. It was something more powerful, something softer, but no less intense. The Queen had spoken their truth, and now they were listening. The Queen's voice cut through the murmurs. I will stand by Elias as he has stood by me, but I will not force you to accept him. If you cannot accept this change, then we will part ways. But if you are willing to listen, to see beyond your fear, then I ask you to join me in shaping our future. The crowd's response was slow at first, but it grew stronger with each passing moment. One by one, the voices of the protesters began to change. Some lowered their banners, some stepped back, and others, many others, began to cheer. They had heard the Queen. They had felt the truth in her words, and in that moment something shifted. Elias couldn't believe it. He had expected chaos, violence, but instead he saw hope. He saw the first signs of unity. The Queen had done it. She had reached them just as she had promised. The future, uncertain and dangerous, still lay ahead, but for the first time, Elias felt the weight of it lift, even if just a little. As the crowd began to disperse, a quiet sense of peace settled over the plaza. The Queen turned to Elias, her expression softening. We have not won yet, she said quietly, but we have taken the first step. Elias nodded, his heart still pounding in his chest. Together, he said. Yes, the Queen replied, a faint smile on her lips. Together. And with that, they turned back toward the palace, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. But for the first time, they felt ready. Together, they would face whatever came next.